This one? That's
Just gotta let the mic do it.
test, test.
perdoar. Mesmo que tenha sofrido todo o meu tempo perdido, nunca mais te quero amar. Mesmo derramando lágrimas, eu não te posso perdoar. Mesmo que tenha sofrido todo o meu tempo perdido, nunca mais te quero amar. Hoje fico procurando esquecer sua maldade, conviver no abandono, pra fazer sua vontade. Apesar de ser sincera, tu é quem me fez chorar, não fez mal. Sigue o destino que o mundo vai te ensinar. Mas mesmo assim, mesmo derramando lágrimas, eu não te posso perdoar. Mesmo que tenha sofrido todo o meu tempo perdido, nunca mais te quero amar. Hoje fico procurando esquecer sua maldade, conviver no abandono, pra fazer sua vontade. Apesar de ser sincera, tu é quem me fez chorar, não fez mal. Segue o destino que o mundo vai te ensinar. Mas mesmo assim, mesmo derramando lágrimas, eu não te posso perdoar. Mesmo que tenha sofrido todo o meu tempo perdido, nunca mais te quero amar.
Jazz.
Seen a well-to-do up and down Park Avenue on that famous thoroughfare with the music in the air, high hats and arrow collars, wide spats and lots of dollars, spending every dime for a wonderful time. If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Put no different types who wear a day coat, pants with stripes, and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Put no limits. Dressed up like $1 million trooper, trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. Super duper, come let's mix. We're Rockefellers, walk with sticks, we're umbrellas in their midst. Put no limits. you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Putting on this. From types who wear a day coat, pants with stripes and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Putting on this. Dressed up like $1 million Rupert. Trying mighty hard to look like Super Rupert. Mr. Cooper, come let's mix with Rockefeller. Walk with sticks or umbrellas in their midst. Put on this.
Oh, j'aimerais tant que tu te souviennes des choses heureuses où nous étions amis. En ce temps-là, la vie était plus belle et le soleil plus brûlant qu'aujourd'hui. Les feuilles mortes se ramassent à la pelle. Toutefois, je n'ai pas oublié. Les feuilles mortes se ramassent à la pelle. Les souvenirs et les regrets aussi. Mais le vent du nord les emporte dans la nuit froide de l'oubli. Tu vois, je n'ai pas oublié la chanson que tu me chantais. C'est une chanson qui nous ressemble. Toi qui m'aimais, moi qui t'aimais, nous vivions tous les deux ensemble. Moi qui t'aimais, toi qui m'aimais, mais la vie sépare ceux qui s'aiment. prolong, and soon I hear a wedding song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall, when autumn leaves start to fall, when autumn leaves start to and a sunbound, clouds and rainbows. I hum a tune that seems like it does. Write some words about anything, anything to know. I paint a picture of my prison with blue and gray for the skies above. Frame that sign with its title, anything alone. Yeah, to go, but I won't miss him. I've got better things to do, like writing stories and make pictures of anything alone.
not seen it. Oh. Strange.
Saying that your mic's picking up sound in the stream. So is it just like lower? I'm not sure.
Across the street from the courthouses. You're welcome to rent a facility here, and it's one of the ways that we generate some revenue to pay for all the public programming that we do. Please remember, when you're here, LA Law Library does not provide legal advice. If you need legal representation in court or specific advice about your facts and circumstances, you would need to hire a lawyer for that. But we provide lots of education and self-help resources 6 days a week and 1 evening each week here at Maine. So I hope you enjoy this class. I hope you come back and visit us after Law Week and make sure that your friends and your family and your colleagues all know that there is a free legal resource for those who need legal assistance here in Los Angeles County, and that there are lots of us who are very happy to help you and provide service. With that, I will turn it over to our very capable presenter today, Attorney Michelle Hopkins, who's going to teach you what you need to know about the legal ramifications of turning 18. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Michelle Hopkins, and I'm actually a family lawyer, but I deal quite a bit with children and the process of turning 18. My son actually just turned 18 last month, so in preparing for this class, I actually went through the experience of having a child go from being a minor to becoming an adult, which is quite a process. Today I'm going to give you general information regarding what happens when a person goes from being a minor to being an adult legally. There's a lot of details in some of this regarding Social Security cards, birth certificates, passports, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I have provided a resource sheet. And does everyone have turning 18 legal resources and information? It's one of the handouts, and the purpose of this is so that after this class you'll be able to use these resources to get further information. And I do want to point out that the State Bar of California has two fantastic publications. They're free online. The first one is called When You Turn 18, A Survival Guide for Teenagers. And almost everything I'm going to say today is contained within this pamphlet. The pamphlet also has much more detail than I will go through today and resources, so I highly recommend getting a copy of this free online from the State Bar of California. The Bar also has prepared and publishes Kids in the Law. So it's for children who are 17 and under. Again, a bunch of information regarding children's rights, parents' rights, etc. Highly recommend both of these pamphlets as a fantastic resource in your libraries or in your schools. So what does it mean to turn 18? Legally, the term is that you have now reached the age of majority, and in California, that age is 18. So that means that you are essentially an adult in the eyes of the law, which can be a good thing and it can be a scary thing. You have new rights, responsibilities, and there's new legal consequences. One thing that my son finds very interesting is that now that he's turned 18, I am no longer responsible for him. So financially, legally, in terms of liability, the adult who turns 18 is responsible for themselves. So there's a lot of freedom there. They get to make choices about many, many things. But there's also a lot of responsibility that comes with that as well. So the process from turning from 17 to 18 is that your parent essentially loses control over you legally. Your parent can no longer make decisions for you. However, a lot of people still reside in the same home, and there are a lot of things that are worked out in families that are not legal control, but it's the way that a family is going to run in terms of living in their home and what their expectations are. So it's interesting to see a teenager go from 17 to 18, and yes, they are an adult. However, they're living in a community, they're living with a family, and there's going to be expectations for all kinds of things that are not legal, but they're expectations for the family. Now, there is a way to become emancipated prior to the age of 18, and emancipation is essentially having all the rights of an adult. So in California, at age 14 or older, you can petition the court for emancipation. And in the pamphlet that I referred to, the State Bar pamphlet, they have a whole section on emancipation. So the new rights that the 18-year-old will gain. Essentially, the 18-year-old does not have to get permission regarding their life from their parents anymore. They have new rights, the right to vote, the right to make decisions regarding medical care, the right to enter into binding contracts. Sometimes that's a lease on an apartment, buying a new car, the right to join the military, the right to marry without parental consent. So when they're 17 and under, they can't join the military or marry without their parental consent. Once they turn 18, they can. With regard to the right to vote, there is, the Secretary of State has a website, but essentially you need to be a U.S. citizen, a resident of California, to vote in California, 18 years or older on election day, and not imprisoned or on parole for a felony. So that is a substantial right that people look forward to exercising when they turn 18. To register to vote, you can go online at the California Secretary of State, and there's actually an application that you fill out. You will need to provide a California driver's license or a California identification card, a social security number. There are also paper applications, the post office, the DMV, for people that are just getting started in their voting rights. Decisions about medical care. I think this is a really significant change for a child going from 17 to 18, is that the parent is no longer in control of what type of medical care that they receive. So the 18-year-old needs to consent to medical care. The 18-year-old needs to be provided with what's called informed consent, which is that the doctor needs to explain the process or the proposed medical care, and the 18-year-old needs to decide that they understand it and that they want to receive the medical care. On the flip side, they have the right to refuse medical care. I think we've all seen stories on the news, the tragedy of young people who have mental health issues and refuse care. And at 18, the parent can no longer control that. So there are some serious ramifications when you have kids with mental health issues when they turn 18 in terms of taking medication, continuing in therapy, and that can be a very difficult time for families. An 18-year-old also has the right to privacy, which seems kind of simple and fundamental, but even with my son, I noticed he didn't understand that when he turned 18, the doctor had to ask him if I could accompany him at an appointment. The doctor had to ask him if the conversation between my son and him, if I could be in the room and hear the conversation. And the concept of confidentiality, I think, for young people is a new concept. But essentially, they have, as we are all well aware, they have a right to privacy regarding their medical records and other documents, school records, and they have, the ability to sue or enforce their rights in terms of the confidentiality of their medical records and other records. I did want to mention that in terms of consenting to medical care, there are a few exceptions in which a child under the age of 18 does not have to get their parental consent. Those have to do with seeking medical treatment for a rape or a sexually transmitted disease. A child 12 or older can do that without their parents' consent. Seeking treatment related to a drug or alcohol problem or birth control. And the pamphlet that I mentioned regarding teenagers turning 18 has an entire list of, and there are very specific details about these rights that young people under the age of 18 have with regard to medical care. Yes?
Is this specific to the state of California? What you did?
All of the information that I'm providing that's a good question, thank you. The information I'm providing today is regarding the state of California. Some of this information may translate to federal rights, but I'm specifically talking about California law right now. Thank you. Entering into binding contracts. So, as most of you here are adults and probably have faced the situation of having to enter into a binding contract, which can be very stressful. A contract is a legally binding agreement, and a teenager who's 18 is able to enter into a contract, again, without parental consent, without talking to a lawyer, and there's a possibility that they may be taking advantage and entering in a contract that is not favorable to them. However, that will not be an excuse for them failing to perform whatever they agreed to in the contract. So they are legally bound by contracts that they enter into. Examples: buying a car with a monthly car payment, signing a contract to lease an apartment, So the consequence of being legally obligated to carry out a contract is you can be sued for breach of contract. So an 18-year-old can be sued for breach of contract. On the flip side, an 18-year-old can sue other people. So that's a new right for 18-year-olds, is that as adults they can file lawsuits on their own. A person under the age of 18, in many instances, needs to have their parent, or what's called a guardian ad litem, file the lawsuit on their behalf. And there is information in the pamphlet from the State Bar of California regarding the details of that. But essentially, a guardian ad litem is when an adult who's been authorized by the court stands in the shoes of the child and files the case on behalf of the child. So when you're a child, you can have a guardian ad litem. Once you turn 18, you wouldn't have one unless you were deemed to be mentally incompetent, and then you could have a conservator or a guardian ad litem. Other legal rights, owning and selling property, making a will, inheriting property, purchasing health and car insurance, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in detail, is very important. In particular, in California, car insurance is mandatory, and across the United States, health insurance is mandatory under the Affordable Care Act. If you don't have health insurance, you will receive a fine from the government for not having it. So these are two issues that 18-year-olds need to be made aware of: health care and car insurance. In addition, an 18-year-old can independently, separate from their parents, apply for Social Security benefits and other government benefits. A child who has a childhood diagnosis of a disability, when they turn 18, they will no longer receive the Social Security money unless they apply as an adult to continue the disability. So there's a disability application that needs to be completed, and they will get a notice from Social Security a couple months before their 18th birthday informing them that if they meet certain criteria, such as a diagnosis of a disability before the age of 18, that there's certain things they need to do. There's a large disability packet that they need to fill out, and Social Security will process that. We'll have actually the 18-year-old signed a release, gather all medical records, have the 18-year-old fill out an application, parents fill out an application stating their functioning level to determine whether they are truly disabled and unable to work. In addition, an 18-year-old can change their name legally without parental consent. So they would go ahead and file a name change case in order to change their name. Some other things that change when a child turns 18, there's no longer a need for a work permit. So a person that's 17 or under, there are labor laws restricting when and how many hours they can work, what type of work they can do, and they need a work permit. When a child goes from 17 to 18, all of those restrictions are removed, which can be a good thing, but also the child needs to be made aware that there are labor laws that protect them. And these are the labor laws that adults are used to referring to. But the protections that a child has in terms of labor laws are removed once they turn 18. Also, my son was happy about this, curfews in many cities do not apply to kids who turn 18. And the laws of truancy in terms of attending school do not apply to kids who turn 18. Opening a bank account, I would recommend that when you turn 18, just go to a bank and sit down and talk to the person who's in charge of opening new accounts, and they will provide you with the information. Basically, you need proof of identity. Who are you? If you have a Social Security number, you need to provide one. ATM cards and debit cards. This presentation was prepared thinking that the audience would be people that are just turning 18. So I know that everyone here knows what an ATM card versus a debit card is. But these are the types of things that, and even a credit card, that need to be explained to a person who goes in, opens a bank account, and they're given different types of cards and how do they work. And in particular regarding credit cards, the consequence of that, although there are some laws limiting the ability for people under 21 to get credit cards at this point. Your responsibilities, so when you turn 18, you do gain many rights, but you also have responsibilities. Your parent is no longer obligated to support you. So prior to turning 18, the parent has a legal obligation to provide food, clothing, shelter, and support. And after they turn 18, the parent no longer has that obligation. So the 18-year-old is faced potentially with financial issues of finding a job and of paying taxes, which most employers will take care of that. But the idea that you need to file for taxes is something that would be new to a child who's never worked and is now 18 and is starting a job. There's mandatory health insurance and car insurance laws that the 18-year-old would need to know about. A big consequence of turning 18 is you no longer have the protection of the juvenile court. So the juvenile court is for children under the age of 18, and you will face the adult criminal consequences. In terms of civil laws, you have civil liability now when you turn 18. And what that means is, if security number, when you go online, there's a form that you download and fill out. I went on the Selective Service website, and I was actually very surprised to see that almost every male, regardless of your legal status in the country, is required to register with the Selective Service. So, according to the chart, permanent resident immigrants, refugees, parolees, asylum immigrants, undocumented immigrants. I was really surprised. Transgender people. So they have this chart on the website which essentially checks off yes for the categories of people that need to register and no for the very limited people that don't need to register. One of those would be someone that has been deemed to be mentally incompetent. And I put the Selective Service website on your resource sheet. Yes?
I came to ask that one question. I only have one son,
Yes.
and I still have to register.
Excuse me?
I only have one son, he still has to register.
You have one son?
One son, my only child.
And is he between age 18 to 25? Yes. Yes, so he has a social security number, he can do it online. I was also surprised to find out the penalty for not registering, possibility of a $25,000 fine, jail time, and denial of federal aid. So it's a big deal. You technically have 30 days to register. I don't think the government is tracking it. I think it comes up if you get caught up in some other situation, but you're supposed to register within your 30 days of your 18th birthday. So every male should be registered.
Well, he gets federal aid for college, so I'm sure they know.
So if he does, he should, and again, you know, the federal government has so much information all over the place, you know, a lot of times the wires are not crossing correctly.
Oh, good.
Yes, so, but in any event, an 18 to 25-year-old male should be registering with the Selective Service. The other big issue that comes up for people that are turning 18 is proving who they are. And this actually happened with me because I moved, I lost my son's social security card, I lost his birth certificate, and he didn't have any ID. He doesn't drive, he doesn't have a driver's license. So he's turning 18, and we need to go start doing things, opening bank accounts. If he wants to work, he needs a social security card. And I had no proof of who he is, except for his school ID card. This was very interesting to figure out that we just assume as adults, of course, I have my social security card, my driver's license, different forms of proving who I am. But for someone turning from 17 to 18, it may be the case that they need to gather the documents to prove their identity for various different reasons. So these are some of the government-issued documents that are required or helpful to establish your identity: the social security card, copy of your birth certificate, California driver's license, California identification card, or U.S. passport. And on your reference sheet, I included the websites for Social Security, birth certificate, passport, Selective Service. So I provided the websites because, to be honest with you, there's a lot of information on these websites. Just the information about how to obtain a certified copy of your birth record in the state of California, there's an entire pamphlet and an application. There's a 5-page pamphlet and an application. So rather than trying to pinpoint exactly what's required to get a copy of your birth certificate and trying to give that information to you, I urge you to go to these websites. You can download this pamphlet if you need to get a certified copy of your birth certificate. And as well, Social Security, DMV, the websites are amazing. There is so much information. It tells you based on if you're an immigrant, if you don't have a driver's license, all the scenarios, what proof you need to get the particular document that you're seeking. So, for example, Social Security, Social Security Administration website is amazing, and you can sit and read it for hours. You can do it if you don't have a Social Security card, an application. The requirements vary depending on if you're a U.S.-born citizen or foreign-born. So they have the list of documents required, evidence required. Social Security does require a certified copy of your birth certificate, and in California you'll be going to the Department of Public Health, and I have the website on your resource sheet. getting a certified copy of your birth certificate, you need to go to the county recorder's office in the county where you were born. In California, you will go to the website, the California Department of Public Health, and you have to do an application for a certified copy of your birth certificate, which you'll need for Social Security. So I needed to get a copy of my son's birth certificate, but I had to prove that I was his mother. So this was fascinating. So I filled out, you can fill out an application online and you send it in, but you have to go to the county recorder's office, and I had to show them ID to say, I'm Michelle Hopkins, this is my son, and then they would process my request to get a copy of his birth certificate, because the person that's on the birth certificate and their parents can get copies. There's an option to just get the application, fill it out, and mail it in, but your signature as a parent has to be notarized. So my point here is there's a lot of detail to this. It's complicated, but something to be thinking. When a child is 17, the idea of gathering these pieces of identification for their future as an adult, there's a lot of work, and it's kind of confusing. So I started with my son when he was about 17 and a half to start figuring out how to establish him in the world as an adult with all of the documents that he'll need to get a job and to function. This is just information about California driver's license, and I provided the DMV website. You provide a Social Security number if you have one, and a birth certificate. There's a vision exam, there's a traffic exam, a driver's exam, and you have to show proof of financial responsibility. There we are with talking about car insurance again. So again, take a look at the DMV's website, and they will list all of these. You also need to prove your residency in the state of California, and they have a list of documents that prove your residency. So for my example, I had to bring in a document with my son that had his name and our address to show that he lives in California, and he lives in Los Angeles County. But for some children, they may not receive any mail. You know, I happen to have some documents, but these are the types of things that you have to do your research before you go into the DMV. And I think everyone knows now that DMV takes appointments. So I would never go into a DMV office without an appointment. It's very easy. You go online, you schedule your appointment, and it's a pretty great system. If you're not going to get a California driver's license, you can get a California identification card. That is also processed through the ID. Either you have a California driver's license or you have a California identification card. So this is a very important card to get for people to have a photo ID that's government issued. The other alternative is a U.S., which also is a photo ID. You have to be a U.S. citizen, and you have to prove who you are. I put the Department of State's website. They have a long application, and they have very extensive information of, again, the types of documents that you need to submit when you're trying to get your passport. Any questions on this information so far? Yes?
The ID from the public schools are not count as government ID.
Excuse me, what's the question?
The ID from the public schools are not count as government IDs.
No. So the question is an identification card from a public school considered a government-issued ID? No, it's considered a photo ID, and the DMV will take a look at it, but it's not considered a government-issued ID. And everyone should have a government-issued ID, just for the various things that an adult will come across as they are living and things they want to do. You need to have some kind of photo ID with you. Any other questions on this information?
And you have to have a federal ID to get a plane ticket.
A government ID to get a plane ticket. So that concludes the PowerPoint, but we're going to do a quiz now. Don't worry, it's true or false, and it's information, a lot of it I have not shared with you, so I'm going to pass it out, and everyone take a few minutes to answer the questions, and then we'll go through it.
I do have one more question.
Yes.
With regards to medical care, you mentioned a few different scenarios where someone under 18 would have the right to confidentiality. What about mental health? So if a child under 18 was seeing a therapist, would they have the right to patient and doctor confidentiality?
That is a great question. So the question is, when a child is under the age of 18 and they're seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist, do they have a right to confidentiality that basically trumps their parents? Are you saying that they could keep their parents away from their information? And the answer is no. So the situation with therapy is that until the child turns 18, the parents are the holders of the patient-doctor privilege. And the parents can waive the privilege or not. So when you turn 18, you have that privilege. And I think that a lot of therapists will make it clear to the parents that they don't plan on sharing the details of therapy with their child to the parents for obvious reasons, and they promise the child confidentiality. But when it comes to medical records, consent to treatment for mental health, the holder of that privilege and the person that's able to waive the privilege for whatever reason is the parents who have legal custody. So if parents have joint legal custody, they're both holders of the privilege. If there's sole legal custody, the parent who has sole legal custody is the holder of the privilege and is the only one who can waive it. Usually when a mom and dad are divorced or don't live together, both parents usually have the legal right, and oftentimes it's in a court order, to have access to all medical records. Yes.
So, in joining the military has their own justice system. How does like the right to remain silent, the right to return to prison for a person? You don't lose any of those rights, do you, under the military justice system or when you're in the military?
So the question is, when you join the military, do you lose your constitutional rights? No, you would not lose your constitutional rights, but they do have a separate system, a separate legal system essentially for the military members. So that is a separate process, but you wouldn't be divested of your constitutional rights just because you're in the military court. Yes.
Thank you.
We went to the yearly checkup for medical, right? And that was the very first time when the doctor told me, you know what, because she's turning 13, which is a teenager, right now I have to ask you to step outside because I want to have some work along with her. And I was like, why? So I did it, and afterwards I talked to my daughter. But again, can I ask to the doctor what happened in that interview? Because after that, every year when she goes to the annual checkup, it's the same.
So the question is, if you have a child under the age of 18 and the doctor asks you to leave the room to have a private conversation, do you have a right to that information? I would say that most likely you do have a right to the information. The issue there is that the doctor wants to be effective in treating a child. They may be talking about things that the child wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to you with regarding. So, but you do have a right to the information. In terms of, a doctor also has a right to say, this is the way I run my practice. In order for me to be effective and treat teenagers, I need to be able to tell them that I can speak with them confidentially, and that I don't need to share this information with you. So a doctor could also essentially draw a boundary with you and say, this is what I need to do to be able to be an effective doctor. Any other questions? Is everyone filling out the pop quiz? We'll go through that in just a minute. presentation at my son's school last year, and I will tell you that the teens were very bored with the PowerPoint. Because teens now, they need, this is like 1980 to them. You know, they want to see a lot of things flying in, lots of lights, and anyway, my point is, the teens were not interested in the PowerPoint, but they were very interested in the quiz, and I found it to be a very effective way to get participation from the students. So when I handed out the quiz, everyone filled it out, and then we went around the room without putting too much pressure on people. I had people answer various questions, and it generated a lot of discussion, and that's the purpose of the quiz, is to cover other areas that are really important for a teen to know about, but in a different method instead of a PowerPoint. So that's the point of this, in terms of a teaching tool, and in terms of engaging teenagers and young people in a way that they find interesting. So in terms of the first question, you may register to vote anytime after your 17th birthday, true or false? True. I was surprised about this too. As soon as you turn 17, you can register to vote. You can't vote, but you can register to vote, yes.
It's 16 now.
Oh, it's 16?
Yeah. You can
Good to
register
know.
vote when you turn 16.
That's amazing. Okay, so everyone change that to 16. But yes, I was surprised. I did not know that you could actually register. So again, my son and I went online and he registered. He's good to go. He's ready to vote in the next election. Number 2, you must carry proof of car insurance at all times while operating a car. True. We've covered this in the PowerPoint. If you're under 21, you cannot drive with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08% or higher.
False.
True.
False.
You can have any.
If you're under 21, it's 0.01. So essentially, you can't have really any alcohol in your system if you're under 21. Here's one we're all guilty of. Reading a text while driving is not illegal. False. So anytime you're using your hands, if you're looking down at a device, it's not legal to do that, even though we all, unfortunately, frequently do it. But I think driving is a huge issue for teens. As I'm sure most of you are aware, the most likely people to get into accidents are teens, and the distraction of the cell phones and the different devices is obviously a whole new problem in terms of driving and causing accidents. I know that in California the laws have become more and more strict, but it's really important to let young people know that are just becoming adults, maybe this is the first time that they're going to have their own car, they're going to drive, and they're going to be liable. They have liability now to know the rules. And the pamphlet that I gave you, when you turn 18, it has an entire list of about 24 different laws regarding driving and teens. That is really helpful to go through. You could even create in the handout for teens. Number 5, a chemical test, breath, blood, or urine is required for a criminal conviction for driving under the influence. True or false? True or false?
True.
False.
Because you could kill someone, you don't need to have, breathalyzer to kill someone before you drive.
So, for the conviction of driving under the influence, there can be the observation of people. There's different, it's not required. You don't have to have a chemical test to be convicted. It's probably way less likely that you would be convicted, but it's not required for a DUI. Number 6, driving alcohol as a passenger in a car is legal if the passenger that's who's drinking is over the age of 21 or over. False. No one can drive in a car with an open container. No one can drink in a car, in a vehicle that's being operated. So it doesn't matter if you're a passenger, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can't drink in a moving vehicle. Number 7, it is not illegal to throw small items like paper from a moving car. True or false? False. It's illegal to throw anything from a moving car.
Including your husband.
Excuse me? Yes, don't throw your husband from the moving car. Yes. So and I think I really tried to focus on some of these driving issues that young people would probably find themselves in trouble, and to educate them in terms of these things, actually it was an education to me as well, but to educate them on these little things, they could end up throwing something out the window, getting pulled over, and getting a fine. So just to educate them on the driving requirements in the state of California. Number 8, under California law, it is illegal to drive a car unless the driver and all passengers have seatbelts on.
True. What about cars that don't have seatbelts?
So the answer to the question is true. It is true that the passengers and the drivers have to have seatbelts. Now your question is, what if a car doesn't have seatbelts?
It's an older model.
It's an older model. I really don't know the answer, but I would think that would be a problem. I don't know if you have to have the seatbelts installed, but I know the law is that you have to have restraints. Did you have a question?
Once I read on the DMV pamphlet that you have to adapt that seatbelt. You have to get away.
That makes sense. You would have to basically have the seatbelts included in the car. Number 9, under California law, it is illegal to smoke inside a car if any of the car's occupants are under the age of 18. True. Number 10, if you're under age 21, your driver's license may be suspended for up to 1 year if you're caught drinking alcohol by the police.
True.
That is actually true. And I think it's a very important thing for young people to realize. If you're under the age of 21, you cannot drink alcohol. Nobody can supply you with alcohol, even your parents. And if the police determine that you are under the influence, you don't even have to be drunk or hurting somebody. If the police determine that you're under the influence, that you've had alcohol, they can suspend your license, which is a big deal for someone who's it's a big deal for anyone, but for a young person, I think it's a really important deterrent to understand that your license can be suspended.
Okay, can I get it? It says if you're under the age of 21, like under any condition you're caught drinking.
Yes.
Well, not even driving.
Yes, it's illegal for anyone under 21 years old to drink.
Drink at all.
Yes. Number 11, it is illegal to have sex with someone under the age of 18. True or false?
True.
Absolutely true. And I think this is a very important one for young people. You can have, there's many situations where there could be a young couple, and one of the people turns 18, and they may have had a relationship for several years. But so this is it's a delicate issue, but that is considered statutory rape. So you cannot have sex with someone who's under the age of 18. It's considered that person does not have the ability to give you consent. So it's a serious issue. I think it's just important for young people to understand that is the law, even though a lot of young people have relationships in which they're having sex, but that is an important law to keep track of.
Even if they're both under 18?
Yes, they cannot, yes. Even if they're both under 18. Yes, they can't, it's illegal to have sex. Yeah.
Wow.
Number 12. It is legal to give a person under age 18 a cigarette if the parent consents.
False.
What do you think? False. False. So you cannot give, essentially, a minor child, anyone under the age of 18, you cannot give them a cigarette. Number 13, under California law, it is illegal to open another person's sealed mail.
True.
That's federal. Isn't that federal?
That is true. It's also California law. There's also a penal code in California. I'm sure it's also federal because there's federal crime for interfering with mail. So I think this is something that's important. As a young person, you probably wouldn't think it was a big deal to mail comes to your house, it's your roommate's or it's somebody else's. You're going to open it up or you're curious, and to know that it's at minimum a state crime is an important thing to educate young people about. Number 14, all contracts must be in writing to be enforceable. False. So you can have contracts, you can have oral contracts that are enforceable. And I think, again, that's an area where a young person may think that when you hear the word contract, I think of paper, a document you're signing. And in many instances, you don't need the document, but you can still have a contract that would be enforceable. Number 15, a landlord may refuse to rent to you due to your sexual orientation.
False.
False. In California, it's illegal. Sexual orientation, your sex, your marital status, if you're disabled. So we have fantastic protections for people attempting to rent apartments. Number 16, a property manager may enter your apartment at any time if he or she is the owner of the property.
False.
False.
That is false. And again, for a young person, they need to understand their housing rights. So when you lease a apartment, you have a right to notice. Unless it's an emergency, if the place is going to burn down, people can come in to save people and to obviously to put the fire out. But a property manager, even an owner, has to give you a minimum of 24 hours notice if they intend to enter the unit.
Pipe bursting is also considered emergency.
Excuse me?
Pipe burst.
So pipe bursting. So, and my point in including this question is for a young person to understand their right in terms of, essentially it's an invasion of privacy, and to understand that when you sign a lease, your leasehold is that that apartment is your lease, that is where you live and that is your lease, and someone that's an owner can't come in unannounced, and a property manager, unless there's an emergency, can't come in unannounced. Number 17. You may be turned down for a job based on your credit score.
True.
It's true. This, I think, is a huge issue for young people to understand that having bad credit, getting cable and not paying the bill, not paying your electric bill, the gas company, credit cards, it is going to come back to haunt you in a big way. Bouncing checks at a bank. So all of these things that a young person would probably think it's not really that big of a deal. And sometimes in some instances it isn't necessarily, and the maturity of just not paying the bill. It's understandable that people do that, but your credit score, as we've all learned, follows you, and employers can check your credit score and they can make a judgment about you as a person and how you're going to be as an employee based on a credit score. I don't think that's necessarily fair, but I know that that's done. So the credit score becomes a reflection of you. Very few young people understand the concept of credit or a credit score and the importance of it. And the importance in the future, if they want to buy something, buy a car, leasing an apartment, your credit score is always looked at, and buying a home. So educating young people about the concept of credit and the credit score and how important it is to pay your bills on time, I think you do them a great favor by educating them on that issue. Number 18, your employer may monitor your personal emails on company computers.
True.
That's true. Again, this is a privacy issue, and for young people who are going to be going into the workforce for the first time, to understand that your privacy at work, you really don't have any. So if you're on a company computer and you're on your personal Gmail account and you're sending emails back and forth, your employer has a right, when you're on the company computer, to monitor all of your communications. And I think it's important in terms of understanding your lack of privacy at work, and also to make sure that you don't want your employer to be basically into your personal business, and you don't want to say anything that would be considered inappropriate that you would otherwise not say to an employer. So just to understand, for a young person to understand that they really don't have much in the way of computer privacy rights when they're at work, and they may not understand that, especially people who are new to the workforce. And that would also apply to company cell phones, company tablets, all of that is you don't have the privacy right on those devices. Number 19, your employer may fire you without giving a reason.
Before 90 days, yeah.
Excuse me?
Before 90 days, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true.
This, again, is an education for young people that it's called an at-will employee. Most jobs are at will. Most jobs you don't have a written contract. You may have a letter telling you you've been hired and giving you your salary and your benefits, but you don't have a written contract and you're at will, which means that your employer can come in and tell you today's your last day, you no longer have a job here, and they don't have to give you a reason. Now, obviously, there are reasons for firing someone that are illegal and that are protected in the state of California, and if you later find out, if you suspect that you're being fired for one of those illegal reasons, you can take legal action against your employer. But the employer can fire you on the spot. And this is, again, an education for young people moving into the workforce and understanding that there's not a lot of, the employer has a lot of power. If you're in government jobs, there's usually more of a set process of there has to be an evaluation, documentation, documenting you to finally have you leave the government employment. But in the private sector, it doesn't work that way. They can show up at your desk with a box and tell you to pack your desk and leave, and they may not be doing anything wrong as long as they're not firing you for an illegal reason.
Just way out left, curious, like, I have a daughter who's at the Coast Guard Academy, and she was required to purchase a computer through their issued student, and of course they took it out of their pay, but it's, so where's that, so it's hers, I guess, personal computer, they took it out of her pay, but it's required.
So this is an interesting question. I don't necessarily know the answer, and the question is, and these are the types of questions that people need to be thinking about. This is a great example. So your daughter is employed, is in training with the Coast Guard?
Yes, you could say that.
So she's in training. Is she being paid by the Coast Guard?
Yes, and so they deducted pay, they issued her the computer and deducted it from her pay.
So she's been given, was she told to go buy a computer? Or they gave her?
They were gonna, she was required to, but they were issuing a specific computer because it has government access to it, stuff like that.
So they required her to get a computer, and she's actually paying for it, but it has, she accesses government information on it, and it's part of the computer she uses at her job. I would say that they have that she doesn't have a right to privacy on that device, because it's being used in the course of employment. So I wouldn't think that she probably should not have an expectation of privacy in that regard. But these are the types of interesting questions when you're teaching young people about this transition from being a minor to being an adult. When I did this quiz with young people, there were all kinds of different scenarios that were presented, and they were very surprised by a lot of the answers to these questions, but it ended up being a very effective way of teaching them about all of these. There's a lot to know when you turn 18 and you become adult. It's kind of overwhelming, but there's a lot to know, and you're expected to know it. No one's going to hand you a handbook. You're an adult, here you are, this is what you need to know. So it's up to parents, friends, teachers, the community to educate teens. And that is actually the end of our pop quiz. Does anyone have any questions?
Number 20, we want to hear.
Number 20.
Oh, number 20. Sorry. Under California law, it is illegal to access someone else's computer without authorization.
True.
That is true. So that's a little confusing because I just told you that a workplace computer, the employer can access it, which they can. So I'm talking about, I should have clarified this question, I'm talking about a private computer, let's say my computer at home. My son has his friend over. His friend gets onto my computer and gets into my computer. That is illegal. It's illegal to access someone else's computer. This is not related to work computers as we have discussed. Does anyone have any other questions?
If it's always like my wife has her own personal laptop, and then she has an issued laptop, but if she happens to have her own personal laptop at school, they can't touch that.
So if you have a personal laptop and you have a work laptop, if you're not using your personal laptop for work-related issues, then probably they wouldn't have the right to access that. But I'm not an expert in this area, I'm just assuming. But anything that is, when you're doing work and it's a work-issued computer, they have a right to access all of that. And they also have a right to see what website you go on. I mean, they have a right to go in there and see what you've done on the computer. You have a question, sir?
Yes, for number 20, How about your spouse and your kids? Can they access without authorization?
So that's an interesting question. Is it illegal for you to access your wife's computer without consent? So technically, yes, it is. It's illegal to access anyone's computer without their consent. But is there going to be any effect? If your wife basically doesn't mind if you access the computer, you guys have an understanding. If no one's going to enforce the violation, then there's going to be no consequence. But yes, it is illegal to access someone else's computer. A lot of people have family computers, or they have agreements. I have a desktop, and my son knows that it's okay for him to use it whenever he wants to. So then it would get a real gray area of, you know, we have a community of family computer, basically. Any other questions? Yes.
About checking my kids' devices, it says they are under 18, there's no problem, right?
If they're under 18, yes, so that's a good question. So if they're under 18, then you can monitor their computers and all their devices. So, you know, cell phones, tablets, computers, etc.
But then there is another question. What happens if, for example, in social media, you got a list of your contacts, right? So through that list, you can go and check out somebody else's activity in that social media. And what happens if that person is older than 18? Like, for instance, I like to check that all the friends that my kids have, they are like about their age, and people that have to do something with them, because you know there is a lot of people that try to contact minors through the social media, pretending that they are something that they are not.
So your question,
right?
is it legal for you to go on social media of your child's friends?
Exactly, something like that, just to check out who they really are.
Again, I'm not an expert, but I would say yes, because the social media, there's privacy settings. So if they've left it open, I would say that yes, you could do that, but I'm not an expert in this area, so I would probably do some further research on that. It's actually 2 o'clock. If you have any questions after the presentation, which is over now, I'm happy to answer those. But I do urge you to use the websites in the State Bar of California. I also wanted to mention on your resource page, the California Courts Online Self-Help Center, it's under legal information, is absolutely amazing. Anything you really want to know about California law is on there. You can put in a topic and it'll give you everything you need to know. So it's a great resource. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
No,
Good day.
thank you. I really have.
After you leave Michelle, if you want to speak with Michelle for a few minutes.